There we go.
Yeah, thank you. And then I will share the screen, and briefly I will try to again be quick. And yes. Yes, I think you can see now. Yes. Our new speakers is Deanna Landers and Peter Monkhouse, and welcome again. And I want to give brief information about them. Peter is the co-founder of the NewGenP and a training and consulting company. He teaches project management at the University of Toronto, Toronto Metropolitan University, and ProSep Associates, and he's also a PMI Board of Directors and active for Project Managers Without Borders. Peter has led projects in education, consulting, engineering, and more. And Diana served as a member of the Board of Project Management Institute and as Program Management Director at the Charter Communications, and currently is the founder and president of the voluntary organization Project Managers Without Borders. And then I will give the floor them and yeah, stop sharing. Yes, you can
Great.
share if you want.
Well, thank you very much. We're grateful to have the opportunity to be involved in this event and be involved with this this group of presenters. I also personally feel grateful to be part of the project management profession. It's unique in that it requires skills that are needed everywhere. Any change, anything that's done in the world is done through projects. So anytime there's some kind of strategic initiative that's being implemented, anywhere there's disaster recovery, humanitarian effort, whenever there's innovation being brought to fruition, it's through projects. So today in this presentation, we're going to be reviewing, going over some opportunities to apply project management skills and experience outside your day job to make the world a better place, how to determine which of those volunteer opportunities would be a really good fit for you. We'll give examples of the types and skills that are needed the most, discuss how to engage the target community or the organization that you're looking at, and then also how to complete the contribution with the highest level of satisfaction for you, the project manager, and also for the community being supported. We in the project management profession focus a lot of our time on our careers, the jobs we're paid for, and those jobs are really important. They make the world go round. We improve our crafts. We try to be the best of that we can be. We increase our impact at work and reap the rewards like recognition, respect, greater responsibility, opportunity, and obviously the satisfaction of a job well done. Our employers and clients, colleagues, management, and teams benefit from the changes that we manage as well. But most of us aren't working in the social sector. Doesn't mean what we're doing isn't important. It's clearly important. But we can offer our project management services on a volunteer basis and feel that satisfaction of contributing to humanitarian and social needs. There are so many needs in the world where project management skills can be applied to make a meaningful difference. So to improve the good that organizations are already doing and directly impact those in need. When you think about how we as individuals can help, a lot of options come to mind. We could provide money. There are obvious things that we can do. Money, things that clothing and food, all sorts of things. We can provide lodging for refugees and labor, like filling crates of food or building a house, that kind of thing. And all those contributions are wonderful, and a lot of them are for noble causes. But what I'd like to suggest is that we in the project management profession contribute at a higher level, that we contribute our expertise. Anyone can ladle soup, but not everyone can coordinate the ladling of soup across multiple locations, for instance, or the provisioning of the soup ingredients, or handling the food storage and allocation. That requires project management, and applying our expertise leads to even more impact. So in our next slide, we've got us project managers as superheroes. Here we are, we've got all these great skills, but how can we apply them to help out? Right now, there are 40,000 international NGOs and about 10 million worldwide, if you count the ones that focus just on one country. And all of them are trying to improve the human condition. There are people in these organizations that are passionate about what they do, doctors, engineers, food service processors, and they want to accomplish their goals through projects. They do accomplish their goals through projects, but do they do that efficiently or effectively? They might be managed well, they might not be their projects, they might be fulfilling for the teams involved, they might not be. They might achieve the goals, they might not. So that's where project management comes in. It's a great opportunity for us to improve efficiency and effectiveness in these spaces for NGOs, bringing our expertise. So the pictures here on this slide are from a project that I was involved with, Project Managers Without Borders was involved with in Tanzania. It was actually, there was St. Joe's was a hospital in Denver, and they were taking down the old one and putting up a new one. And they didn't want to move the equipment, the old equipment, to the new medical center, the new hospital. So what they did is they took that equipment to some medical centers in Tanzania. They had done missions like this previously, but this one was special because they hadn't moved so much equipment. When we talked with them in the beginning, they didn't really understand that they needed any project management, but they were willing to talk with us about how we might be able to help from a pro bono perspective. And what ended up happening is, in this room, everybody was sitting around, and I introduced myself first. It was our very first project. And I said, here's what project management is, and here's what it can do for you, and here are the sorts of things that we can get out of it and the benefits. And after that, every single person around the table introduced themselves and said, and we need you. Before, they didn't recognize that they needed us, that they didn't need, that they needed project management. They were just doing good. Everything, they could see the good they were doing. What they couldn't see was how the good could have been more efficient and effective. So a couple of problems that they told us about were that when they were there on site previously, there was one person with the key. And when they had to get into operating rooms, they had to find that person. And sometimes it would take a couple of days to do that. Other problems were that they would lose power occasionally, just here and there. It wasn't something that they could predict. And so one of the great things that we did in that space was help them understand how the IT team could help the clinical team with what they were doing when they had downtime because the power was out, and the other way around, and what sorts of things they could do to stay efficient and effective. We might call it a risk matrix, but we didn't. We didn't use that terminology because we didn't need them to learn our language. We needed them to use the tools and improve their approach. And the last thing about that project that I want to share is the actually the most valuable thing, that deliverable that we were able to provide was an impact report. The program was up for renewal, and the management was thinking about canceling the mission program. And what we ended up doing was creating the impact report that showed here was the value of the mission to the people in Tanzania, the doctors in Tanzania, the clinics in Tanzania, the doctors from Denver, and the whole system. And it was, nobody had ever looked at it that way. Everybody was just looking at, well, what did the beneficiaries get, the people on site in Tanzania? But it was really important that the doctors and the IT people that went over on the mission had got some value from it too. And so that was just an amazing experience, and they really appreciated our help there.
Yeah, thank you, Deanna. Sorry about the little mess up in the slides. The beauty of Deanna being on the ocean and me being in Toronto, trying to keep things coordinated. So as Deanna talked about, there's lots of things that we can do as project managers, but one of the things we should do is help provide focus. So one of the ways we can do this is by using the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So the goals were approved by the UN in 2015, but they've been around for a while. The first idea of this started in back in the Earth Summit Conference in Rio back in 1992. So these are things that we've used at Project Managers Without Borders to help us provide focus. As you can see from the icon on the previous slide, we started off looking at health and goodwill just by the nature of having that project, but we've then moved into thinking about water as well as around climate change. And we'll talk about some of the examples of projects that we've had working in these areas to help support the non-for-profits to build a sustainable future for us. So sustainability and looking at sustainability is all about making sure that the results are sustainable. The idea here is that we've got to think about this perspective of sustainability as we manage our projects. Now, this idea of working with constraints and thinking about things is something that comes naturally to us as project managers. We're all used to managing projects to make sure we're on scope, on time, on budget, on quality, the triple constraint, the iron triangle. In the sustainability world, they also have the triple bottom line, where they're trying to balance the planet, people, and profit. So some people will use this as environmental instead of planet, the 3 Ps, but profit and economic is sometimes used, but it's the same idea of trying to balance these 3 things. So we already have this mindset that we're working on constraints. We have to allow enough money for our organization, whether it be a non-for-profit, because non-for-profit means the profits get put back in the money into the organization, doesn't mean to say they lose money. Right, we have to make sure the organization gets enough money to fund its operations, so we can't go and spend lots and lots of money. We want to make sure we leave the world a better place than when we found it, and we don't want to help burn out our people. So we have to balance these. So that puts us in a good position as project managers to come in and help organizations think about sustainability. As we go through the rest of the presentation, we're going to look at sustainability from 5 different perspectives. And this is very enlightening to me. I certainly realized there were more than one perspective look at sustainability, and certainly working with Deanna, we got the list up to 5. So the first one, and of course the most obvious one, is the product of our project. Is it sustainable? Are we creating sustainable products? And there's a lot of discussion about what that looks like, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this. Second is, will we allow the benefits of that product to become sustainable, right? So as we introduce a new product or service, will it be sustainable over time, or will people fall back and do things the old way? Third, as project managers, are we managing the project in a sustainable way? Are we looking at ways of reducing waste? Are we trying to make sure that we're optimizing our use of resources, whether that be people, equipment, facilities, and material, to deliver the product and ultimately the benefits? The fourth one is managing the team. Are we thinking about managing the team in a socially responsible way, the people part of the triple bottom line? Are we trying to make sure that our team members have work-life balance? They're not being burnt out, all right? And there was some conversations, earlier presentations about talking about that. And then the last one, are we ourselves sustainable? Are we making sure that we are getting the rest that we need, we're having the right work-life balance, that we're not being overstressed, that we're getting new knowledge and skills that we can allow ourselves to continue to add value to our organization? So as we go through, we'll talk about these different dimensions. So first, let me start talking about the first 2. This idea of promoting project sustainability. Right? How do we, as our project, look at our product that we're creating on the project to making sure it's sustainable? Well, like anything, we should start off with the end in mind. We should understand what our product is, right? What are we trying to build? And we should be asking questions about, is it sustainable? What are the sustainability requirements for this particular product? What's expected from us? And if people don't know, we should be asking them to find out. We should be asking questions about what happens to this product at the end of life, right? We should be asking questions about where do the materials come from that are going to go into the product? What's the supply chain look like? We need to ask those questions and make sure that we're getting requirements that will allow the product to be sustainable. We want to also think about the long-term impact, right? It's all very well to say, well, we'll get the product built, but that's then someone else's problem. No, the buck stops with us. It's our problem. We should be asking, what's going to be the impact? What's going to be the impact of building this product and the material we use it? Is it going to be something that will help the world improve, or is it going to cause problems in the long term? One of the things that another skill as project managers we bring is understanding stakeholders, how to identify stakeholders. And one of the things that often we get blinders on is we miss stakeholders. We don't talk about all the stakeholders. We don't think about the broader community. We often don't even think about what the impact will be on communities outside of our immediate customers or clients for the product or service or our staff. So we need to think about this and pay attention to all communities and what the impact will be. And the last thing, as we think about our project and we think about measuring success, as Glenn talked about in the previous presentation about what's the definition of done and what's the definition of success, are we including sustainability metrics in this? Right? And I'll come back and talk about metrics in a few minutes. But before I do that, Deanna, we've got another great project to share with our audience here.
That's right. And we called this project Water Rico. We were focusing on Sustainable Development Goal 6, which is clean water and sanitation. We partnered with Rotary International and we started with the simple idea that they wanted to address community water needs better. They were coming off a bad experience in Madagascar where their well drilling solution was way more expensive than they had planned, and it wasn't even sustainable by the community. So when the wells stopped working, the community was without the solution again. So in this case, we didn't necessarily have the traditional project manager role, where we were very supportive of the Rotary team that was running the project. The point from the beginning was we need to make this solution sustainable. We found a community multiple communities in Puerto Rico. That's why it was called Water Rico. And they had been hit by multiple hurricanes, and their infrastructure didn't start off that great, and it became worse. So what they were doing after these hurricanes was the water would come, it would rain, and it would roll down the roofs, and then they would capture that in buckets, and that was their water. So clearly not a very clean solution. And so what the Rotary team wanted to do was identify a solution that would work in the example where they didn't have good infrastructure, at least water infrastructure. So we helped them come up with a solution. And if you look at that first picture, you're looking at the very first solution. We had two proofs of concept. The first one was concrete, and we made sure that it was material that could be sourced from the locals and put together. So they went out there, they put it all together, they tried it out, and it worked. But what we found by talking with the people that we were trying to help is that they weren't portable. Well, obviously, if it's made out of concrete, they're not portable. And that was something that they really wanted. The community wanted to share. They wanted a solution that was portable. This would have worked, but the Rotary decided to look into a better solution. So the second opportunity that they came up with was a design that used buckets like you would get at a hardware store. And so still, all of the materials were available from local stores. The the people of this one community, 3,400 people in this community, were able to just buy these materials. And the goal of Rotary was to get water, clean water to every one of those people and have them be able to create the solutions going forward. So what they did is, instead of providing these filters, they provided instructions for the filters in Spanish and in English. They provided information on how to go through creating it, what the list of materials were, and they had sessions where the community got together and built these filters themselves. So, and they actually lasted at least, or they were supposed to last at least 5 years. And so they could just go get more or create new ones or swap out the parts that they needed, because they understood how it was being created. So the point there was that the community was able to sustain the solution even after the team was gone. From the beginning, they knew that they could create the filters on their own using local materials.
Thank you, Deanna. That was a great project, and it's a very good example about how we were able to help them as well with measuring the impact. So one of the things that we want to do with all our projects is to understand what the impact is. Now, certainly we want to do that from the organization's point of view, but also as a volunteer, it's also important to know what the impact is, to think about, we've made a difference in the world and this is how we've done it. So it's something that organizations often forget to do, and think with their volunteers to say, well, what difference did you make? And to be able to communicate to them. So knowing that as project managers, it's important to have good metrics. It's something we can help them out with, to help them understand they need to collect it, not only to share with themselves and the organization, share with their donors what impact they're having or what the metrics are, and with their volunteers. Now, when we start measuring impact, right, we are measuring things coming out. We often will talk about outputs, outcomes, and impacts. So outputs are by far the easiest. They're things that we count. So in the Water Recall project, we could talk about how many kilometers of pipe we laid in a particular for the project, or how many plots of land that we were able to irrigate, right? How many families were we able to provide filters to? So these are nice sort of metrics that you can have, but they're outputs. They're things that are easy to measure. And it doesn't ask questions, so what? So then we think about outcomes. So what does it mean? So in the case of the Water Recall project, we provided so many filters, right? But the outcome was that so more families, so number of people had fresh water. Fresh water meant less disease that they had, right? Better quality of life. So now we started to talk a little bit about an outcome. But the impact is what happens in the longer term. Often very hard to get, because it becomes, you have to follow along. So were the families now that had the filters that got fresh water, were they able to have a less disease and they lived longer? Were they able to go on and get better education because they were able to go to school because they weren't sick? And that allowed them to improve their overall quality of life. So that becomes the impact, what we're trying to get to, right? So as we think about our projects, we need to think about having metrics in place. Okay, Deanna, time for another example of a project we worked on.
All right, so this project is in Accra, Ghana. And the situation that they are faced is, actually the entire city is faced with recurring flooding. The way that the geography is set up is that there are floods because of there's a valley, and then it rains and it floods the capital city of Accra, and this recurs all the time. And you think, well, then why haven't we resolved this before now? One of the key things that we identified, actually, let me back up and say there was a team working on this. Many PMI chapters, including Belgium, UK, Luxembourg, Greece, and of course, Ghana, were involved in this, and PMWB coordinating it, identifying what were the reasons that we hadn't figured this out in the past. And a lot of it had to do with, we'll say, politics, but not in the governmental kind, but the kind that is, I want the credit, and if you do something great, then you get the credit, and that kind of thing. And so what we ended up doing is helping people identify that if we measure impacts and we're all involved, then it's a collaborative effort and we all get the credit. So another point there, and that sounds kind of simple, and I am simplifying it some, but one key issue one key advantage that we had was we were seen as expert advice from international and renowned project managers and engineers from lots of different countries, going to Ghana and recognizing that there's a problem and providing our support on the recurrent flooding. And so the people, the government, research organizations, other organizations were involved. They identified that it was good for them, all of them, to coordinate and support each other's efforts. And because of that, they could measure some of their impacts because it wasn't an impact of somebody else being contrary to their impact. It was the team's impact as an organization or as a larger group. The other thing is that they measured how much or what the impact was of the project management assistance that we provided. And they were able to take that to other ministers higher in the government to note that this expert advice was something that should be followed no matter who you were, right? So we ended up with, we identified storm drainage management, waste collection, disposal, collaboration, things like that were issues, and the joint success were key areas identified in our communication plan. And so that was the huge impact that we had, was from the perspective of measuring impact and their identification and acceptance that measuring was actually a good thing for all of the stakeholders.
Speaking about communication plans, communication, of course, is the next thing. So thank you, Deanna, for that. So as we know, communication is the #1 reason why projects fail, according to studies done by PMI. Also the #1 reason why projects are successful. So as project managers, we learn we have to create a communication plan. We learn the importance of communicating to everyone, all our stakeholders. So this also applies for working with NGOs and nonprofits, as we've discovered, that we need to be able to publicize the work that we do and publicize it broadly so all the stakeholders know what's going to happen and what the value we're delivering. So having metrics is great, but we have to share them right through the communications. We also have to keep people updated of what's going on. It's not just say we're going to do something and disappear, right? We have to keep them updated. The idea of transparency to make sure people know what's happening helps build more support from the stakeholder community. We need to keep doing that, and plus for volunteers, so they don't get disillusioned as well. Donors to see what their money is, to keep communicating, see what the money is being done and how they're helping to achieve the goals. We have to communicate our successes, right? It's important to build morale with the team, but it's also important for the wider stakeholders to know that we've had successes, that we've achieved these goals and we're making things on target. And of course, in today's world, right, we've got lots of tools that are available for us to help with our communications, whether it be social media, whether it be impact reports, which Deanna mentioned back to the hospital example. We have to be able to communicate broadly what we've achieved. Now, we also have to let people know what's going to happen next, right? And how we can make sure that that's in place so the stakeholders understand what we're doing and help to continue the good work and continue to sustain the project and sustain the benefits. So we have another nice example of this that you were very much involved with, Deanna. So back to you.
Yes, so about a year ago, I moved away from the San Francisco area, but a year before then, we started this project in the East Bay of San Francisco, where one teacher started an initiative and recruited students to lead it. Their point or their purpose was to inform the community of the effects of climate change and then seek solutions and actions to reduce its effects. And that's the Climate Positive Student Network. What they did, as you can see on the slide, is they created a website that was to inform the other East Bay schools to start. And then one of their goals is to expand their information and their approach to other schools around the world to make sure that they have even more impact. So they provide, or the group provide schools with a list of ideas. They collaborate to get experts to speak and have possible actions. They pre-vet and approve videos and articles. And what's really interesting about this initiative project is that it's student driven. It was started by a teacher, but her whole goal was that it needs to be student driven. She's a grandmother and she wants the world to be a beautiful place for her grandchildren. And she really wants to do what we all should do in with sustainability, and that is help those help themselves, help those children help themselves. So it's student driven, adult supported. So our role as project managers with our project management knowledge was very supportive. It was a unique opportunity from a project management perspective, because though there was leadership, it was from a preparation and knowledge transfer perspective. We were basically consultants to the students. For instance, we didn't teach PMBOK guide concepts or any project management vocabulary. Where we were able to have a really big impact was to help them understand the value of things like a schedule. You'd think in a school setting that the schedule would be clear because they have, you know, their syllabus and things like that. But what kept happening in the beginning was the date would move because, well, something happened and some COVID thing happened again, and things would just change. And we had to come down to have that conversation and say, does it matter? Does the date matter? And of course the date mattered, because one of their goals was to do something for Earth Day. And so the date mattered. It was one day that they had to address. But what I had to recognize is that the scope, not a word we used in that situation, that the scope could change. They could do this much or they could do that much. And it was all, there were so many other priorities that were more great than this, because their goal was being a school and educating on all sorts of things, that this kept going down. But what they were able to do was put it in the curriculum for many schools. So now climate change, climate action is now part of each of those schools. And their whole goal is share the information. They had absolutely beautiful newsletters with, they created videos, they created articles that students researched about fast fashion and all sorts of other interests of theirs, butterflies and things like that. And I was really moved by the passion that these students had, and by the ability that we had to share our knowledge to support this group of kids. And each school organized events and actions to show their own interest and advocacy in support of our planet. It was middle schools and high schools. So that's about, I don't know, age 10 to 18, basically. On this last slide about this project, we have a picture of the mayor of Emeryville, which is a town in the East Bay. It's about 1 square mile town, not extremely large, but this mayor, he had a protest by this school that we worked with, a middle school. And they interviewed the mayor. You can see them in the background with their signs, and they called it a protest, but it was really a supportive session where everybody was all for improving the climate and those sorts of things. The school improving the climate and supporting those actions that do improve the climate. The school created a butterfly program. They planted trees, just this one school as an example. And this mayor actually helped the kids understand that the kids' impact to him was that he was able to be informed when he went to the UN Global Climate Convention last year. he took their ideas and thoughts to that convention and helped the teams understand their value, that how communication is so critical, and how if you say something and you impact somebody else, and it can be contagious. And so it was really a fantastic project, and it's not over. It's over for that year, but it continues on, and they keep changing what they need to be doing. But their key goal is sharing with the community information about climate change and climate action, and sharing their successes and how valuable what they've done has been for the community.
Thank you, Deanna. It was a great experience. So the last thing we want to just talk about is ourselves and making sure that we are sustainable ourselves. So, one of the things that I certainly have found, and through my volunteering, is that how much has helped me grow and acquire new skills, which has led me to some very interesting roles, both as a volunteer and professionally as well, that would have never opened up for me. So that's certainly one advantage of volunteering and allowing for personal growth. But we have to be careful with volunteers. So the first point here is to make sure we volunteer at a level that's appropriate and sustainable. So we talk about this as volunteering in doses. We all tend to go through different cycles, whether it be with our families, because of our kids being involved in events that have on seasons and off seasons, or whether work has high points and low points. So think about contributing or volunteering in doses, when there's a slower time, when you can make a stronger commitment, right? So rather than trying to commit to something every week, or when you know some weeks you can't, think about when you can do it over a couple of weekends when things aren't as busy. Next, question the complexity, right? So that's another attribute we have, right? In project management, we're always trying to simplify. So do that as well when you volunteer. Keep it simple, right? Keep it simple. It's easy for you to do, easy for the organization to help give you a role that's appropriate for you. Okay, as I mentioned, watch the busyness of your life, right? Don't overcommit. And one of the hardest things I've had with leading volunteer teams is to have a volunteer who says they're going to do something, and you just look and they don't have time. Why are you volunteering? You're in a busy period. So watch that, because it just adds more stress to everybody. Now, if you do end up overcommitting, which sometimes happens to the best of us, make sure you declare that rather than getting yourself burnt out, right? We, as leading volunteers, I know you have your family. I know you have work that are going to take priority. I don't want to have you burn out because you can't meet a commitment. Let us know, let the leader know, so that they can make adjustments just to avoid the burnout. And the fifth one, I guess, which is so important, is when you volunteer for something that you're passionate about. I mean, we have enough things that we have to do in this world that aren't all that exciting. So let's make sure that when we volunteer, we're going to do something that we're really passionate about. It's going to excite us, that we're going to look forward to. So wait for the right opportunity. Wait for that great idea. Don't just take the first idea that comes along. Make sure it is something that you're really passionate about. Whether it's something you're passionate about, whether it's an interest you want to explore or understand, whatever it is, something that will excite you to go and do that volunteer work. And for our last story, Deanna, you have an example of this.
I do. So Freddie waited for the right project for him that had personal significance. He was working with us and Project Managers Without Borders, doing some Spanish translation, and he was just doing a little work here and there as he was able. But this project came up, and it had personal significance because he was born in Ecuador. And this project was with we partnered with Engineers Without Borders on the project. There's a community in the Andes of Ecuador. And the situation is the people at the top of the Andes, they get all the rain. And so they have all sorts of water. And the communities at the bottom, the water comes down, and there's a stream along the valley. And so the communities at the bottom have all sorts of water as well. But the communities in the middle, which is where this community was, didn't really have a good way to collect and distribute their water. And so Engineers Without Borders was working with them on irrigation so that they could have, water their fields and have the crops that they needed throughout the year. And so when Freddie heard about this project, he was really excited because he was already going to Ecuador to visit his family. All he had to do was take a little side trip to this community in the Andes. And so his work was so tremendous. It was so helpful, partially because he was so passionate about the experience and the opportunity. So the community that's in the Andes is very different from the one that he grew up with in Ecuador. He grew up in a town or a city, and these folks it was a very small community, under 1,000 people, and they actually spoke Quechua and Spanish. Some of them spoke Spanish, but not all of them spoke Spanish, and even fewer of them spoke English. And the Engineers Without Borders teams didn't speak any Spanish. So he had that opportunity as well. He was able to connect with the people. So when you look at this slide, Freddie put this slide together as his list of growth opportunities that he was so happy to be able to experience when he was out there. So his first picture is the community that came together to help dig, to put the irrigation in place. And then his second photo is he was noting how high he is, how far he had gone, GPS in his personal wristwatch like thing. And he was able he really appreciated all of the learning and mainly the connection to the people in his home country. It was an absolutely wonderful experience for him. And on top of that, he really wants to support our organization some more, because we were able to give him an opportunity that connected so well with his interests. And certainly the relationships in the field were tremendous. His skills also improved. He was not a very experienced project manager, but he worked with even more experienced project managers on the project, and he was able to build his PM skills as well. So now we're going to talk about opportunities to contribute. So there are so many different ways to find opportunities to contribute your project management skills. We're in a PMI event, and I would say that the first thing to do is think about your PMI chapters. Lots of them have all sorts of opportunities to volunteer to make a world of difference in your specific area of interest or knowledge, days of service and things like that, where PMI chapters are involved and interested in helping and getting volunteers to do that. PMI EF, they have hours for impact. A couple of our projects were just highlighted through the program online with videos and articles. That program is absolutely wonderful, keeping track of the hours that project managers spend helping make the world a better place. So earlier today on another panel, I mentioned that there are all sorts of other places where you could make a difference that aren't PMI or aren't necessarily clear that it's a project management organization. It's not a professional organization, like schools, clubs, religious organizations. You're already part of that community. If you talk with somebody, not necessarily about project management, but about improving efficiency and effectiveness, you might find that they're very interested in getting some support from somebody with your skills. There are all sorts of other organizations like hospitals, girls and boys clubs, and obviously we're talking about relief effort. Those sorts of projects, there are all sorts of organizations that may want your skills. They might not call them project management skills. They might call them organizational skills. They might not have to do with project management, but I would, as I suggested earlier, I would think that it would be, you'd be able to contribute more and have a much larger impact if you can contribute your project management skills. Any other organization that supports a cause that you're interested in. And so the big DIY on the screen is do it yourself. If you're interested in a particular cause like disaster recovery, animal welfare, children, whatever the cause is, get involved in an organization and help them understand your skills, help them understand what you can do for them, and realize it's not just I can create a schedule. You know, you can help in so many different ways. Facilitating skills. Think of all the skills that we have and all the variety of things that we've done in our professional roles. A lot of these organizations have project management skills in place, but they don't necessarily apply them in the most efficient manner. So we might be able to help them with things like a fundraiser or drive for resources or a rally, something that they might not even thought of before, that we could actually do it ourselves, create a project, run it for them, help them see the value of project management, and then maybe we can help later on as well. One of the key points that we've made already is that whatever work we do needs to be sustainable, and we just need to keep that in mind. Whatever we do, we can't show our brilliance and leave. We need to show our brilliance, share our brilliance, help them be brilliant, and we'll be inspirational for them. They'll be able to go forward and sustain the value, the larger, greater value that we've provided for them. I would say and the last item on this list is volunteer organizations like volunteer.org or Project Managers Without Borders have projects. They're asking for volunteers. And so that's another place to find a spot if you want to volunteer your project management skills. And then lastly, I'd say PMI has a website called Times of Need. And this is a really great hub for information. So I'd suggest going there and just seeing what you can see there. All right.
I was getting ahead of you, Deanna. Here we go, the summary slide. Sorry.
All right. So I'm not going to read these. I think that you can look at them, but some of the key points here is make sure that when you are contributing your project management skills and expertise, you recognize that what you're doing is providing effective humanitarian work, not just spending X number of hours or teaching somebody one thing. It's looking at all the things we just talked about, measure the impact, communicate the success, and those things will help the organizations that you're supporting continue with the value of project management. So on our last slide, this is my very favorite quote: "Be the change you want to see in the world," by Mahatma Gandhi. Contribute, share your skills with those who need it most. Whether that means facilitating meetings for an NGO, coordinating a schedule for a mission, organizing a scout camping trip, or helping municipalities avoid future disasters, your skills can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of all those efforts and improve the impact that they have. So realize it starts with you. It starts with us, but you. Recognition that you have the knowledge and the skills that can make a significant difference in the lives of others. I encourage you to apply project management knowledge and skills to make a difference, to improve the good that organizations are already doing and directly impact those in need. Thank you for attending and helping us make the world a better place through project management.
Yeah, thank you, Deanna and Peter. And also thank you for your volunteering tips, because I can say that, for example, I have also volunteered in the Board PMI Sweden chapter and Turkey chapter. It really contributes a lot, especially for the project management skill, and I also recommend everyone to it. Thank you very much. And I have some question for you. And the first question is, why did you start the Project Managers Without Borders?
I founded Project Managers Without Borders because when I was on the PMI board of directors, traveling around all over the world and explaining to people how important project management was and how without it we couldn't get anything done in the world, and how important these skills are, people would come up to me afterwards and indicate that they really wanted to use their skills to improve the world at large, the humanitarian space. And I agreed. I've always done that, but not necessarily through project management skills. And so all those conversations led me to believe there's a real need and a real desire for this. And I'm so happy that we've been able to accomplish so much over the last 8 years.
Yeah.
If I can just add to that, I mean, I had a similar experience to Deanna about, when I was on the board, traveling around speaking. I remember once I got an opportunity, a wonderful opportunity to go down to Manaus, which is a city in Brazil, right on the Amazon River in northern Brazil. And I was talking about, as Deanna said, about the value of project management and so on. And as we were at the reception, 2 volunteers came up to me and said, "Peter, how can I use my project management skills to save the Amazon rainforest?" I didn't have an answer for them. So we do now.
Yes, great. And the other question, does project managers without borders get involved with disaster recovery projects?
I'll take that one. That's a great question. And we've had some discussion about disasters and project management. So simplistically, and I'm not going to get the names quite right, there's basically 4 stages with all disasters. There's the planning beforehand, plan what to do if there is a disaster. There's the immediate response when the disaster occurs to make sure people are safe and get them out of the environment, the place where the disaster is. There's the next stage, which is you've got them out. Now we've got to make them give them shelter, temporary shelter, make sure they have food, the basic things to survive. And then the last one's the reconstruction, rebuilding after the disaster. So project management does not work in the middle too, right? That's about execution. Project management is very valuable to help in creating the plan to say, if there's a disaster, what should we do? But as some of the earlier speakers said, when the disaster occurs, it's about doing. It's about getting and executing the plan. Right? This is what we do. And of course, when it comes to reconstruction, project management, that's what we all do, is we get new buildings, new infrastructure, whatever it happens to be. Project management comes in. But this is one of the things that is really took me a while to understand, is that when the disaster is happening, then when we all want to help, that's not when we need project management skills. Before and after, you absolutely do.
Yeah, thank you. And one last question. It's from one of the participants again, and then and it's project manager. And how would you recommend I communicate and update when I am awaiting others to finish tasks and don't yet have one?
Yeah, I'll start, Deanna, because I knew this question was coming. So give you a chance to think about it. So yes, I hate this situation. Happens to me more often than I would like. So 2 things that I will share. Deanna probably have more intelligent ones to add to it. She always does. First thing is, if this is happening frequently, it's a good sign that you haven't decomposed your work into small enough pieces. So one of the guidelines I always give when you create a WBS is you want to have your work packages to be able to be completed between status reports, so you can always report progress. So either decompose to smaller work packages or do less frequent status reports. The other one, which is what I talked about earlier in this presentation, is metrics. So even if you can't have some items completed, make sure you have good metrics so you can show progress. Deanna talked about with the climate change initiative that she was involved with, how the kids, did videos and so on. So there was always something to share, always something to say that they had done. So always try to come up with some sort of metric that you can show. And the activity may not be done, but you can say, well, we've made this many kilometers of pipe, or we've done this much of something to help show the progress. Because this is something that's important. You've got to show progress. You just can't have the same report coming back, we're working on this. Deanna, do you have anything you want to add?
Unfortunately, I didn't hear the question very well, but I'm sure that you answered it perfectly, Peter.
If you want, I can repeat. Yeah, it's about the communication and how would you recommend, and this is from one of the participants, and that's why I am saying how would you recommend I communicate and update when I am awaiting others to finish tasks and don't yet have one?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you for repeating that. And I think, Peter really did hit the nail on the head. I think what wasn't said was that you don't say, oh, we're waiting for Joe. Joe is not really coming through with the information. We don't do that, right? But we can share all sorts of information and move forward and share what we have. And then also make sure that we have a cadence so that actually doesn't happen and people are really given incentive to make sure that they provide the status, or that the status is done in an automatic fashion.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the
for this
organizers as well.
presentation and participation. Yeah, it is a really honor for us, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. And also